on this computer. There you go. That's my legal issue that I have to tell you is that the recording is there. So this taxes for Ohio, what's available online is an easy way for you, and you have this in your handouts, to get to a place out at Family Search so you can see everything that Family Search shows with regard to taxes in Ohio. I thought this one was a pretty good one. It gives you the rationale for why you would even want to do it, which is pretty cool. You can look at those records and determine when young men came of age, if it's more than 50, 60 years ago. You can determine when individuals moved in and out and when they died, leaving heirs. Not errors, but heirs, sorry. They can be poll taxes of type. They can be real or personal estate. They could be schools. There's just lots of things that you're going to find. But this particular thing that I'm showing you, that taxes for Ohio, is a pretty complete one. And it just gives you an idea of what you might find in any state. More important than anything, though, it leads you to that Family Search wiki, which is so important. It's just a good place to start. Then, of course, the next thing you do down near the end of that wiki for a particular state is you go look at the actual state places themselves. So there's that one. I'm going to stop sharing on that, and I'll share again on tax references briefly. Just some things that I found and people that I regard as real people who can really help us as experts, and types of books and materials to go to. So I'll stop to share on that and go back into the tax planner blank that is available. I believe if it isn't, you can ask me for it. It's just simply, you got to think about the taxes and what you really want to record. It's not legitimate anymore, not even with a newbie, to say, well, just anything I can find. No, because it depends on where you are going to look. And if you get a better handle on that, so you're not willing to just accept something, you're going to have a very, very good time with the tax materials that you can find. And the final thing, of course, would be that was the tax planner blank again. I'm sorry. The tax primer handout that I have for you, the brief notes. And again, this kind of follows my presentation today. I will warn you, there are other things in here because I've tried to give you lots of samples. I'm going to have to really hurry to get this one done because I think I have about 38 slides. So we'll see. I'm going to stop the share on that. And with that, I'm going to go to the actual presentation and to the slideshow from the beginning. So here we go. And hopefully you can see this. So what tax records might I find? Well, first of all, I'm going to tell you that I regard them as the best yearly census that you can find, other than a school census if a particular state has a school census law, and most all of them do. So it's just another yearly census again that gives you an evidence of the places that a person lived, if they had to pay any kind of a tax at all. They're a direct way to ascertain property ownership and possible inheritance if you're looking, although you do have to remember to go to the various inheritance documents. And they're usually found at the county level. And they're usually retained by state law. Now, sometimes you will see them that they have been sent to a history center or to another place, another storage place, but they are usually available by law. So don't let people put you off with that. Just ask very nicely and give them time to get some of those wickedly heavy books out, because I know the local ones here, at least through the 1950s, there'd be 3 for each year, and each one of those books weighs 75 pounds. you are going to see some easy schmeezy stuff if you look out at newspapers. That's a great way for you to begin to get a handle on some things, but I'm going to call it the low-hanging fruit. You're going to see things like this, where there's a big headline of paper, great increase in assessments. Assessments, by the way, is one of those words you want to take down right now because it needs to be in your vocabulary save for your taxes list. Assessments, there's going to be taxable property or taxables, all kinds of things. Valuation is another great piece of terminology for you to use. Real estate tax, improvements of type. Those are all terms that you can use as you begin to search for these particular things. Don't just look for taxes. You're going to find neat things like this. In Montana, if you owned land and you didn't pay by December 31 of a particular year, such as what you're seeing here, 1899, then the first week in January, your name was going into the delinquency list for taxes for the previous year, and you only had so long to pay it, and it was going to be a penalty with costs. The neat thing here is you're also going to find out what lots were owned and where the particular lots were and so on in these lists. Where were they? Well, they were in the official newspaper for the county, which was the Great Falls Tribune. Bozeman is going to have the same for the Chronicle. Billings is going to have the same for one of its newspapers because sometimes that town traded back and forth for various people, whoever had the newspaper for the year, the newspaper rights with the county. So you can look at those. And of course, Lewis and Clark, it might be in at least two of yours because even if one didn't get it, when the other one did, they still published it. That's the great thing about Lewis and Clark County. So delinquency lists, and they're there. Today, you'll see them finally as ads in newspapers. And if you're in our county, in Great Falls, in Cascade County, you want to check not only the Great Falls Tribune, but you want to check that other spectacular, smaller paper, the Cascade Courier, because it has lots of legal ads. Why do you need to know about it? Well, it's going to help you generate a timeline and a place of residence over a time period. I never get tired of talking about your need to have an actual timeline so that you can really tell all the people who were in a particular place during a certain time period. Timelines will help you so much. And when you can note that that an ancestor actually paid, for instance, a poll tax in Great Falls in 1891, even if it's just a name, you can record that as evidence during a certain time period that tax had to be paid. Hey, that's proof of residence. Remember that tax list occurs every year, and it can substitute for a census if you need it to. You've got to learn what kind of taxes there were, even if a person did not own land, because young men who were coming of age got taxed with certain kinds of poll taxes. A poll tax is a head tax, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes a little more. You're going to be able to find out who got taxed and why they got taxed and who kept the records or needs to. And if you're looking in any state, a particular place for you to look to begin to say, well, why isn't this out here where I'd like it to be online? You might want to look at their records retention schedule. And finally, a real close look for yourself at where and how you can access the tax records. Don't think that because you're not in that particular county or you can't travel there, that you couldn't find someone else to do your research for you there, or that you couldn't make requests in a timely fashion for the people who have control of these records at this point. And do always look out online to see what Family Search, Ancestry, MyHeritage, and so on, American Ancestors, what they're putting out each month, because they're putting out huge amounts of stuff that have been scanned. So what I'm saying again is what you know and what you've learned, it's going to guide your hunt for these. You need to know enough about kinds of taxes from various levels of government that you know what you even might search for. Of course, there were national and income taxes at various times. One of the most famous, looking forward from the Civil War, is that tax that began in 1863 when Abe Lincoln and his group determined that they could no longer afford just to pay for the Civil War with the few kinds of government taxes they were getting. So they successfully enacted an income tax, and it was a considerable one. You're going to find your family listed. There are income taxes at the state, property taxes, business taxes, all kinds of things at the state. And each state has its own, I'm going to call it, peculiar list. Looking at what they have right now can help you going backward. But remember, you're going backward in time and thinking of how did that state support itself once it became a state, or even during territorial times, because there were also taxes in territorial times. County business taxes are there, property taxes are there. It's not a weed abatement. I forgot the D, folks. Like weed abatement, that's tax. At the city, you might find business taxes, local fire department levies, school levies, garbage levies, all kinds of things for a particular way of doing business. So that's just a beginner's list, but you have to begin to think on everything, not just what you can find right now. So you look at kinds of taxes and the evidence available, and you learn the law for the state and the county, what needed to be paid. And so one of the things we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes are those important poll taxes. What evidence exists that they had to be paid? Don't just go for what's available online, but do today, since we have newspapers available to us online, try to go for those local newspapers and see if there are any of those delinquency lists or those attempts to find people who are getting a refund, because sometimes those had to be listed for at least 5 years before the state could say, oh, well, the refund is no longer available. The state gets that now. You always look for that evidence of real estate, property, and individual income taxes paid at the county and the state. Evidence of inheritance taxes paid can be at the county. You're going to want to get hold of, however, the will and the probate, because that can go across states if a person has lived various places, or if they didn't have to pay an inheritance tax because there virtually was nothing to inherit. You might find evidence of a tax exemption because of a homestead rule. Another one-time exemption like volunteer fire duty. And we had that for a little while up in Black Eagle because that was a volunteer fire department. And they got some rebate on various kinds of fees and taxes. So look for those. They're special. They don't always last a great deal over time, but look for them because usually there's information about them in the newspaper. So here's a little brief study of Paris Gibson, the founder of Great Falls, thinking of, okay, so he founded Great Falls in the 1880s, 1883, 1884. This man was originally born in Maine, came out to Fort Benton and was out there after he'd been in Minneapolis and had been a business failure there, and did not die until 1920 in Great Falls. We call him the founder of Great Falls. He's the reason we have all these wonderful boulevards. And I'm glad Cheryl is not online right now. And you'll find him up in Highland Cemetery. Well, Gibson's possible Montana taxes immediately, once the town was founded and it became a city and we became a county right before we became an official city in Montana. So late in 1887, he would become responsible to Cascade County for the property and land taxes rather than being responsible within Choteau County. There would be school levy taxes immediately. city business taxes for any kind of a city business license after the town became a city. Say for sure, you're going to find that stuff by 1896 here. He'd be liable for a probate tax after his wife died in about 1901. I'll warn you, that's a difficult one to find for him, but it does exist. He's also going to be responsible for a federal income tax, which in 1913 finally got added to the U.S. Constitution. Before that, those federal income taxes had to be renewed frequently by the U.S. Congress. In 1913, they got added to the Constitution. So that's where that saying probably comes, the thing that says one thing's sure, death and taxes. And of course, he was going to be, he was going to have to pay for the poll taxes, that is the head tax, which Cascade County had, and Choteau County had too, so that wouldn't be different. In Montana, the poll taxes largely by county were the county poor tax per year. It was a head tax of $2 per eligible person. That would be a man at that point, over 18. And then at one point, for a while, it changed to 21. So take a look and see what the limitations were there. Remember, if you're looking for that and you're looking for any of these poll taxes, that's how you're going to find out how old a person actually was when they suddenly appear in a poll tax list as paid or whatever. And then, of course, the roads per year in Montana, because we didn't have county road departments for a long time after we became a state. He'd also be responsible for this little ditty. In 1917, October 3, the War Revenue Act passed in the United States. We had declared war on Germany, and we didn't have enough money. So the U.S. Congress passed the War Revenue Act, increasing income taxes to way unprecedented levels. If you want to know more about this, go out and look at that and just put 1917 War Revenue Act in quotation marks out at Google, and you'll find out a whole bunch, because boy, did we raise money. And that was good. If you go out and look at your local newspapers, you'll see that people were doing things like raffling off donkeys, etc., in order to raise money for the war effort and sending it to Congress. Let's talk about this particular type of tax called a poll tax. It's a head tax record. They're a great way for you to find ancestors who did not ever own land or have personal property that they at least admitted to or were paying on. It was a great way also to guesstimate the age based on the legal age of taxation. And inheritance taxes were very common in the New England states, at least, and down the eastern seaboard by 1790. They were collected for each eligible head. The most frequently used qualifier was every man at or over the age of 21. It was a fixed sum, and they'll be different in different states. So don't assume that Montana's $2 is what everybody does. In the colonial period, especially in New England first, you'll also find some things in Virginia. The particular poll tax would always have a specific purpose. Maybe they were going to build something, or it was an annual need that they had in order to maintain something in their small communities. In the U.S. territories, it would always have a specific purpose, like in Montana or Wyoming, or even in Texas, when it quit being a republic and became a U.S. state, supporting the destitute or the poor, for example. It required no assessment of value, so it was easiest for county legislators and state legislators to put up the sum and get it collected each year. And it was pretty easy because people told when people came into the territory. So it wasn't just that you could wait till the next year. Frequently, you got it collected right when you came in. In Montana territory, there was a poll tax collected to support the county poor. So that was before we were ever a state. And there was a road tax in Montana territory based on age again. But you could work it if you needed to. It was a fixed sum, $2 in Cascade County. I can tell you in about 1895. And if you could not pay that amount, well, you could go work for the county road or that your area's road supervisor, who were appointed by the Cascade County Commissioners. So here in 1906, you'll see that there were 3 Cascade County Commissioners present at this meeting: Delphi, Bradford, and Rhodes and Rollswick. And they continued the appointing of road supervisors. And these people got so much money to be able to work in these road districts. For instance, number 15 was George Goodman, who was named by Bradford, and he did get appointed. However, in Road District 16, all of them had someone they wanted to appoint, and finally, Rice got appointed. So you'll be able to see these in the newspaper. You'll also be able to see them in the minutes for the commissioner report, so they're available. Many of these are online. Mothers get aid under the pension law. Here was something else. This would have come under our poor law and then eventually under a pension law. Poll taxes, states have different types. The most common are the poor tax and the road tax, and those things I've talked about in New England. But in the South, you're going to find something that was tough, gritty, and awful: the voting fee. And you'll still find these in the 60s, at least till 64, because they were high enough that they excluded many people who could not pay, and they were a real barrier for people. So when you're looking at southern states, and occasionally you'll find some others who had voting fees, look carefully at these and see what they were. They were generally lots higher. Here's an ad for you from Amarillo, Texas in the 1960s from the Chamber of Commerce saying, be ready to vote, pay your poll tax before January 31. So there was a limit. You couldn't pay it as you could afford it during the year. You had to pay it by a certain date, which was also quite restrictive. You're going to look at county and city and town taxes and licenses. If you're looking for a city license, that's going to be, of course, the city level, and many people kept them. It's a tax in Great Falls, just as in Helena or in Bozeman or in Billings or Missoula. In 1919, 1920, the cities were really in trouble because they could not charge suddenly that liquor hall tax that they had been charging as a license, and that was $35 a place. I don't know about you, but in Great Falls, we had way more than 50 bars downtown alone, so we didn't have that money suddenly. Tax entries likely also include a forwarding address if they've moved elsewhere, and they're also listed by law if they have not yet paid their taxes. And it didn't go on for a long time, folks. We have laws now that allow people at least a certain period of time, 6 months or more. But this was a thing in Montana where people were generally giving their land away or ceding it back or giving it to a sheriff's sale, usually by May of the particular year following when they could not pay that tax. So you'll see here that George Waite is the defendant here. In April 1906, he had not paid his real estate tax for the year, and so his land was for sale. Look for these. They will be in the limits. They will be in the particular newspapers, pardon me. What are the benefits for you? Darrow and Winchester are a pair of people who have written considerably about taxes, but they're also very interested in genealogy. I'm going to just remind you right now that if there's a law, there's going to be paperwork that can be found. So if you find a law, they immediately start generating the types of things that will control that. You're going to be able to find the specific place and time of an ancestor, even if it's in a place where the taxes were burned, where a courthouse was burned and the tax records were burned. You may find notice of delinquencies, at least in the newspaper. And here's something you need to look at. Generally, people wanted right away for people to know in those burned county states, they wanted people to know that they had paid their taxes. And because they had paid their taxes, they would bring those back in. They'd bring in some proof so that the county, again, could at least get a copy. It wouldn't be the original, but they would have a copy of many of the things. You can track ancestors' movements from place to place. You can confirm the land ownership and the acres owned. It separates men with the same surname in the same county because you can get down to the nitty-gritty with it. And if you're willing to sort out those surnames and who paid what when, you're going to have a good idea of how to separate those people in your particular genealogies. Again, it identifies men who reached adulthood and were being taxed in a very first year, second year, and so on. It can establish an approximate date of death, especially when you're looking at probate. It may estimate the wealth of your ancestor based on the tax he or she paid. I'm going to ask you to strategize two ways. One is to research, read, and learn the history of a particular tax. Don't take the easy way and just say, well, I'll just go look for whatever I find now, and that's good enough. That's really limiting you if you do that. Look at the state laws of the era. You're going to be able to find all kinds of things out at historical societies that are usually 1, 2, 3 pages long that talk about the types of taxes that were levied and what kinds of records might have been retained by most counties. What county records, what might be available to help you tease out who received the benefits of a tax intended to help the poor. Well, you can look in the minute books for the county commissioners, for example, if you can't find anything else, to see who the people were who were helping the poor. For example, did the county commissioners grant a particular contract, a competitive contract of type each year for people who would be helping the poor or who would be responsible for the poor? You will find that in Montana. You will find that, I know, in Wyoming. So look at your state laws to determine any type of taxes that were levied. You got to find out that there were small farm taxes on chickens, on livestock, on all kinds of things. So take a look at those taxes. Make a list and just say, well, I might not find all these, but this is what I should be able to go after, and keep pursuing these records. At first, somebody might say, nope, don't have those records at all, only to call you a few weeks later and say, you know, I'm kind of chagrined, but I went and looked after that. And you know what? I did find some. It's only for 2 years. Do you want those? True story, happened to me in Minnesota. And one of the most important things, I think, is to work with a partner. Show them what you're doing so that you can see what they might suggest. Take a class or do both of those things so that you can learn even more. So that's strategy 1. Strategy 2 is researching the tax list headings within a state and U.S. records so you know what's available, even to record. Maybe stuff's just been sitting someplace and they have the taxes, but they've never been typed up by someone. They've never been summarized by someone. So you're heading into territory where, no, it's not necessarily going to be an alphabetical record, but you could go after them. When you find these things, be thorough. Record the name, record the date, get any of the information you have. And if a county or a city or a state will give you permission to scan the record or take a photo of the record, do that. Remember to ask first before you take those scans and those photos, however. Write a rationale for yourself. It doesn't have to be real formal for why you're seeking a particular tax record. It's just going to help keep you on track. Okay, I've got a great-grandfather actually, named Zura Cogleiser. He likely moved to Ohio by 1854. That's because I know that he had evidently left Pennsylvania, where he was born, and married Margaret Wart in February of 1854. And I know because I did find them later in Nebraska that he didn't leave there until late 1870. And so his Civil War Union pension confirmed that he lived in Ohio from at least 1860 to 1870, according to the U.S. Census records. And before that, according to his pension file, he was in a couple of counties there, moving across counties, as a matter of fact, in 1854, 1855. He never owned land in Ohio. So what other tax records might be available? Well, probably poll taxes, if I can find them, road taxes of type, poor taxes, anything that the local Hardin County, Ohio, levied by county commission, he might have had to pay. I'm still in relentless pursuit of this one, and I hope that you wish me luck. But you can find particular records if you make a date with yourself to be able to find them. The first thing, of course, is knowing what the context is. That is, what were the taxes that had to be paid, and where are the records? I'm beating this to death, I know, with poll taxes, but they're going to be easy for you maybe to find. I know our poll taxes for Cascade County have been out online at Family Search for at least 10 years. And so you can find them for the years that they were records kept. And I'm assuming that in many other states that will be the case. You're not going to find much more than the person's name or some evidence that they might have a receipt from having worked off the road tax, but those are real treasures when you find them. You're going to find official state and county evidence through payments to schools and school districts and county libraries and garbage collection, levy payments. You're going to be able to find that at the county overall. Even if you don't find it, you might find evidence of those who were delinquent. And you need to look at both records, not just one of a type. A payment of a user fee for a service. For example, if an entity legally created a toll as a means to collect from users, like a bridge toll, or that famous road toll that we all pay $6 for if we're taking the road around Metro Denver, and we're happy to pay it because it's such an easy thing for us in comparison to downtown Denver. There's an example right now of a particular toll. Property taxes, gas taxes that are levied on gas users. You only have to go out right now and look and say, okay, if gas taxes get levied on gas users, admittedly, that's a user's tax, but what happens if the car is totally electrical? That's an interesting process in taxes this year as legislatures debate that particular thing. You might find in a city county directory a listing of real estate and its value, owner by owner. They're going to be frequently at the back. Yes, you'll find your family in front, but you may find that they had farmland or some piece of land someplace that they were paying on, and it will give you the taxable valuation many times. Here's evidence of a Great Falls City levy in 1925. The special garbage levy for the abatement of nuisances totaling $1.29 introduced last week was finally adopted, as was the sprinkling levy of $1.03 a lot, so that you didn't have all that dust. So there were special things here, weren't there? And you're going to find those same things down in Helena, in Missoula, in Conrad, whatever. School levies ranging from 1 to 10 mils. This was an explanation in the late 1920s for people. I've just given you the header here. On that list of terms you need to know include taxables and tithables. They are the types of things that could be valued. Property, personal property, and horribly, because they were regarded as property, slaves. It's a fact, and it is a way to begin to gain some perspective on your family. Inheritance taxes, And I've given you an example here from Virginia. Middlesex County list of tithables in 1769 for free white slaves, servants, and so on. Those not paying in Virginia and in New England, you say, well, a person just wouldn't pay. Who would care? Each taxpayer was required to list his tithables right from the time in the 1600s in New England that he had, and turn that list into the colonial government, whatever it was. Those were listed, whatever a person said he had, were posted publicly, and other members could tell on them. They could identify false or undercounted tithing lists. They could be identified then in a public list as not paying, and they could suffer loss of property for a lost report or for not telling the truth. So you have to be aware there are going to be direct records sometimes, some that are indirect like this, a public list of those not paying, or something like that, like a delinquency list again. And other times there are direct things where you can actually find out what a person paid. Here's a Teton County band of stock from Cowell and Mitchell, ranch owners. 800 head of 3-year-old steers going to be sold at the sheriff's sale at the Cowell and Mitchell Ranch, 3 miles west of Choteau, because they had not been able to pay the taxes on them. Sheriff's sales are good ads to look at. Another book that's a free online, it used to be published. If you have a published book in your library, good for you. But if I were you, I would look way beyond that at familysearch.org, because you will find the latest materials. I'm showing you the 3rd edition here for the Red Book, but believe me, there's way more. Where can you start? I'm going to tell you again, start at Family Search and start at your county level. If you're out looking at familysearch.org and going to search and then going to the research wiki, you're going to be able to put in the county name, the state and then the county name, and at least get a starter list of some things. They've been pretty complete so far. If that good list is not available, go down to the end of their list and see if the county is listed there and if there's a hot link. Many times there's a hot link there. Otherwise, look in Google for your particular county and state and go to that county hot link that will tell you who you can talk to at that county level to find out what tax records are available. Of course, you also need to be looking at your state and county historical society and places like genealogy libraries, because many of them have them also. Look out at the retention schedules of court records. They're available online, not always easy to get to. Right now, our Montana State schedule of court retention schedule is not exactly easy to get to. We'll see what we can do about that, at least in terms of getting it listed a little better. Research at the county to see what's been retained by a historical society or museum, or what's been given over to them legally for their care. Make that list of potential records. What years were income tax collected? What years were personal taxes collected? Inheritance taxes? Then take a look at the legal age of your ancestors and see what they would have been liable for. Go to those county records. Out at Cascade County, I'm showing you what our site is. It'll give you a direct link to county officials. I'm just doing Great Falls because that's what's here. On the other hand, out at the Family Search Research Wiki, there's a whole thing on Montana Cascade County records 1880 to 2009, how to use this collection. Well, you would have to hit in there to see that a lot of these county records that they have scanned more than 10 years ago are still not available by index, and they have not been indexed. So you're going to have to go out there and look at each type of record, and you can look at it, luckily, the type of record in a particular type, like 20 or 30 records bundled in one record for a particular year or whatever. So they're really pretty easy to look at. But be aware that these things are available in many counties, and also be aware that whatever we have, for example, for titles for our records are not the same titles that other counties might have. The city-county directories may list taxables. Boy, we find a lot of them in Montana, and also in those farm and ranch directories. They're just invaluable to you. They're going to have dollar approximations, at least of the property taxables. So they give you some idea if you can't find it, and I would still report that. Go look at the decennial censuses, those U.S. censuses that occur every 10 years. Were they renting? Did they own property? What's listed there? Remember, every census is different, so you have to look to see what they asked. But I can tell you that the U.S. Census had a real interest in who owned or rented properties and types of farm businesses and types of manufacturing businesses, for example, from about 1820 forward. Not all of the records are available, but just knowing about those can help you a great deal as you're looking in those old newspapers. Is there a business listing? Maybe it says that it's a ranch corporation. Go find the business license, the tax, the whatever for the county or the city level. If you're looking at early inheritance taxes and associated fees, there are some neat books for you to look at. And I've given you this in your report, I believe, so I won't talk anymore about the inheritance tax law, Blakemore and Bancroft's book, but it's a really good one. It's out online, and I love it because it's vintage and thorough, really up through 1913. So it's going to help you with inheritance issues prior to that time period. And frequently, we are looking back 4 and 5 generations, so it can be quite helpful to you. They were the first ones, I believe, who did a very thorough job of looking at this particular thing. And you can look at this state by state. Increase your terminology again, and remember that when you have an inheritance tax, it's not always going to be called inheritance. It might be called a probate fee. It might be called an estate tax based on the value of the estate after certain deductions, and those are all different state to state. It might be called a legacy tax or a succession tax, and it might be a type of inheritance tax but differentiated by the type of property. So I've given you these terms so that you can associate them with probate and intestate, meaning the person died without a will. An intestate estate might have something like an inventory available. And so you might look there. If you know the person was particularly poor, then I would ask, at least in Montana and in the West in general, for that county administrator by type who took care of people who were intestate and had no relatives. They still have those duties today. So you'll see things in the newspaper, probate matters. Where there was a final account finally, showing exactly what was dispersed, how it was taken care of, and so on. Because if you want to know, did it ever get taken care of? There were many that didn't get taken care of for 20 or 30 years. On the other hand, some people were very, very good with their paperwork. Look for this in the legal ads. Well, all of this requires your hard work. You're going to have to read to understand what the tax columns mean in counties. Remember that these were being looked after by clerks in offices, and they knew the rules, but you won't. So if necessary, you need to look at the tax laws for the state that tell what information is collected and what its purpose was. You're going to find those in the various statutes and tax books that are published by state legislatures after they meet for a particular year. You will be able to look in those and libraries generally have great collections of those. I know our Montana room here does. I know Helena has a fantastic collection up at the state library, and they may also have one downtown. I'm assuming that other places will have those same records. You got to be willing to really pursue these records that have been handwritten, because they may refer to other documents like the will, not just the probate, but the will, or the other things that came in where somebody said, I object to Minnie May becoming the administrator for this particular will. She's only an aunt or whatever. And many of the records are not well indexed. So you're going to need to look at the info, which brackets your targeted year. Look before and look after so you don't miss a particular record. And above all, do not give up. Don't shortchange yourself, because there's lots of stuff to find. Just remember, there's lots of court records that have never been indexed, but that doesn't mean you can't look at it year by year. It will be really worth your time. Your expectations of finding tax records really govern what you're going to do. If you expect a lot and you're willing to work over a certain period of time, or you're willing to say, I found these two things and I'm not done yet, then you're probably going to find out a lot. Finding new types of any kind of tax depends on your curiosity and your growing ability to find records, or to at least find indirect records about the records kept, like that newspaper list kept every January listing tax delinquencies, or those sheriff's sales. Or even if you're looking, many times people had places that sold off stuff that had been in a storage unit. And that's not just today. That also happened from about 1900 forward, and you would see that in the legal records sale, because the sheriff had to kind of control it, at least initially. Utilize search terms such as delinquency taxes and read to find that special lingo that can really help you. I want to remind you that records in history are recorded daily. Our particular state legislature, just as with other state legislatures, is busy putting together new types of taxes or doing things with tax records every year. So you need to look at it. And, here's one for you to look at. There's a whole problem today in some states. They've already gotten onto the idea of how they could collect quotation marks digital taxes. That is information gotten from one state and not paid for there, but available to the other person via digitally, and what they can do about that. How are they going to collect this tax across states? Who's going to have to cooperate with who? So keep your eye on new tax revenues. There's going to be a record trail. Go keep your own stuff, at least for a couple of years. And if you are really, really careful with things, go also and save just one or two of your U.S. tax records so that people in the future can see what's there. I wouldn't say keep it as a packet. I would say at least scan something that you're willing to say, and be aware of what you would record, and not just what you want them to know, but what were things like during the era in which you lived, because that's what kind of history you are recording for your family when you do this. Records and various kinds of tax history are being recorded daily. I know that we've all been participating in these for a long time. So take time to tell your succeeding generations what it's been like and what it was worth and what you got in return for the tax paid. What kind of services did you get? And what did you think was fair? I'll close this with saying tax information can be pure gold for us as genealogists. And I am going to stop the share at this point.